It looked like Chelsea may have had their striker of the future in Samu Omorodion all locked up and ready to go until once again they thought they were smarter than everybody else in the room, and this time it cost them big time. We're going to break down what happened and what exactly are image rights and how that all factors into this deal falling apart next here on Soccer Wonder Kids at the Pitchside Pub. Samu Omorodion was in London. He was at Stamford Bridge. He was taking the medicals. He was passing them. Don't believe the reports that suggest that he failed a medical, and that's why this deal fell through. That's not what happened. What happened is Chelsea tried to pull a fast one on a 20-year-old, and they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar because Samu Omorodion must have a decent agent, and good for him. This all has to do with his ability to make money based on his likeness and his image and his rights. And it gets a little complicated, but we're going to break down what happened coming up on this video. But before we do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel. Get down in that comment section. What are your thoughts? Did Chelsea screw up, or do they have the right to do this? It's a very complicated business situation, but I'd love to get your thoughts down in the comment section. You can also leave comments on Twitter at Pitchside Pub, and check out the website pitchsidepub.com. So the facts are this: Chelsea and Atletico Madrid had worked out a transfer deal. I think it was about 40 million euros. They'd worked out the deal, and Omorodion was going to Chelsea to do his medicals. And then all of a sudden, I mean, this was 11th hour and 59th minute, right? This was moments from the here we go from Fabrizio Romano. This was about to be signed. It was that close. He was there taking his physicals, and all of a sudden we see just this flurry of reports that the deal fell apart. And we're getting conflicting reports as to why. And it looks like Chelsea's trying to blame the medicals, but that looks like a blatant face-saving attempt on their part. Because the reports that are coming out are that they tried to include a massive clause in the contract, in Omorodion's new contract, that would have given them 50% of his image and likeness rights. And that is a massive chunk for a team to purchase from a player. Now, we're going to back up for a second. Image rights are the ability of the player, the right of the player to profit off of his own name, image, and likeness. We have this in the United States. It's recently become legal for college players to profit off their own NIL, we call it, name, image, likeness, which basically means they can have endorsements. They can go do sponsorships. They can get paid ads where they say, "This is me, now pay me for being me." And that is their right, and that is one of the ancillary benefits of being a star athlete, and it's how they make more money than just what their club pays them. In fact, it helps the club have to pay them less. If you have a player like a Cristiano Ronaldo or a Lionel Messi who can make 10 times more through endorsements than they make from the club, they tend to not care about their club wages quite as much, other than a bragging right. So this is a really important thing for athletes, and Chelsea is essentially trying to take a massive cut of Omorodion's future earnings on his image and likeness. Now, it is common for there to be, it is actually standard for there to be clauses where a player signs over to the club the right to use his name, image, and likeness in things like promotional materials and commercials and billboards and signage and selling jerseys and all those things. That's standard in every contract in every sport. It is also somewhat common for the club to negotiate a portion of those image and likeness rights. And it's usually a small percentage, somewhere between 10 to 30, depending on the player and his magnitude of endorsements. You're not getting 30% of Cristiano Ronaldo's, right? Because that's millions upon millions of dollars. But for a young player, he might be willing to go a little bit higher and sign over some of those rights because they don't have a ton of value at the time. And if that gets him more money on the forefront or what have you, then they're willing to do that. But it is standard for there to be some discussion, and it's somewhat common for there to be a clause in there like that. But again, it's usually in that 10 to 30% range, at most 30%. Chelsea tried to sneak a clause in that was 50%. And I say sneak because reports are calling it that, and because Omorodion appeared to be completely in the dark that this was a part of the contract until the 11th hour when he was, there, and he was he was in London to take the physical, pass his medicals, and sign the damn contract. And then at that point, he must have a good agent, or maybe credits goes to him and he read it himself. I don't know. I don't want to discount the guy, but this is why they have agents and attorneys on their staff. Even young players are represented by an agency. And someone caught this clause and said, 50%? You got to be kidding me. And Omorodion, from reports, was so turned off by it that he just ended the negotiations there and said, no, if you're trying to do this to me, I will never play for you. And there was no negotiation over the percentage and trying to haggle it down. And frankly, good for him. Good for him, because this is direct exploitation by Chelsea. What they are trying to do is take a huge chunk, half, of his future image and likeness earnings. Now, right now, that's not that much. It doesn't have that much value. He's not a massive star. They would start promoting him because he's a big signing for them, as though they don't have enough already. But he doesn't have a huge valuation on his name, image, and likeness yet, the way the true stars of the game do. But he could, and that's what Chelsea's trying to do, is basically place a bet on his future growth, saying it's not enough that we want you to turn into a star to help our club win games. We want half of any revenue you personally generate yourself through your own star power. And that is incredible exploitation of a young player. And what they were hoping for was that the player would not think about his future that much and be so excited to be wearing the Chelsea badge and to be at this storied club that he'd be willing to sign anything and give away any future value as though he's current day Barcelona, right? Let's just sell off future value for money right now. And I'll tell you what, if I'm other young players that Chelsea has signed, I'm calling my agent and going back and looking at my contract and double checking to see if that was in my contract, because that is Chelsea pulling a fast one on a young player in hopes that they want to be there so bad and be in the Premier League so bad that they'll sign anything. And credit to Omorodion for saying, screw you, I'm not doing that. I know my worth, I know my value. I'm not signing away half of my future earnings. Because if you do truly turn into a star, you're going to make more on your image rights than you will from your contract. The true stars of the game are making, tens of millions of dollars a year in endorsements, and they may not be making that in wages. And so to give away half of that would have been extremely short-sighted by Omorodion, and good for him for saying no. For Chelsea, this is just so selfish, right? This is just yet another example of where they have taken the human element out of the business and just turned it into a completely corporate entity. And on paper, I understand what they're doing. They look at that as a potential investment with massive growth. Let's pay a little more now to get this player who we think has a ton of growth potential, but if we can get him to sign over 50% of his future earnings from his image, well, we could cash in tenfold on that. So I understand it from a business sense. I understand most of what Chelsea's doing from a business sense. Collecting assets, getting tons of players in, all young, all with growth potential, the long contracts with the amortization, and spreading it out and then selling them down the road for more money. I understand the business model. None of it makes sense when you realize there's human beings involved, and that only 11 of your 50 bajillion players can play, and that you literally don't have physical room in your dressing room for all these players, and that players care about who they play for, and they're signing to play with Chelsea, not Strasbourg, or go out on loan. And that is going to catch up with them, and we've already seen some players say that they don't want to sign with Chelsea, and it's going to keep happening. I've been banging this drum for a couple years now since Todd Boehly took over. Players are not going to want to go to Chelsea, and not just because they're not winning, although that's a part of it, and not just because they have a new manager every 6 months, although that's also a part of it, but because they're not treated like players, they're not treated like people, they're treated like business assets. And this one's really coming back to bite Chelsea in the butt, because Omorodion's deal was tied to the Conor Gallagher deal, who they're trying to push out the door, literally push out the door, as in, you cannot come into the facilities, you cannot come into the dressing room, go train with the under-21s. Thank you for your decade of service and for coming through our academy and for being a team captain, but sorry, none of that actually matters to us because we need your value to sell. Well, you know what? That's coming back to bite them. You treat people like assets, and you treat people like numbers and valuations, and all of a sudden, you forget that they're humans, and now they don't want to play for you anymore. And Omorodion making that decision now brings Conor Gallagher back, and they're stuck with a former team captain who they desperately want to offload and now have to find a new deal for. So, serves Chelsea right for attempting to do this. As long as they continue to operate as strictly a soulless business that does not treat people like people, these sorts of dominoes will continue to fall and it will continue to hurt them, and they will be the most expensive mid-table team in Premier League history, and that's basically what they've been for the last couple of years. So good on Omorodion. He's going to find a home. He's probably not going back to Atletico Madrid. Frankly, they need to make the money off of him right now because they've spent so much this offseason, but he's been linked with half the Premier League and a couple other companies. He's going to find a home, no problem. He's a good young player, 20 years old, got some playing time in La Liga last year, not with Atletico Madrid. He went out on loan, but he's going to go somewhere where he can play probably part-time, or maybe another lower club where he can play full-time, but he's going to find a home. He's too talented, but it's not going to be at Stamford Bridge, and good for him for making that decision, and shame on Chelsea for trying to pull one over on a 20-year-old who they were hoping were desperate to come play for them. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. This is a tricky one, but get down in that comment section. Let me know what you think. You can also leave comments on Twitter at PitchsidePub. While you're at it, hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel, and check out our website, pitchsidepub.com. Thanks as always for joining us here on Soccer Wonder Kids at the Pitchside Pub.